The scorching sun beat down on the construction site, leaving my skin red and swollen.
Hey, look who's taking a nap. Let's give him a little surprise.
John smeared cement on my face, blocking my nostrils and nearly suffocating me. I jerked upright, frantically wiping the cement off my nose and eyes. My heart pounded in my chest.
What the? John, what were you thinking?
Just having a bit of fun, mate. Relax.
That familiar construction site, that dark face, I would never forget it. Today was supposed to be the day my acceptance letter arrived. But wasn't I supposed to be in a rented room, waiting for the end due to a severe illness?
Michael fell from a building. Sarah remarried. Emily was desperate to marry.
Each memory was suffocating. In the summer of 1980, on that construction site, I had moved 10,000 bricks under the scorching sun. Exhausted, I leaned my head against the bricks to take a short nap. John and I worked at the same site. Seeing me asleep, he smeared cement on my nose, causing me to lose consciousness due to the lack of air.
I missed the arrival of my acceptance letter.
Later, I found out that Robert had taken my acceptance letter and given Mr. Smith $10,000.
Mr. Smith, this money will ensure my son goes to college, right?
Yes, and no one will ever know.
Despite my repeated inquiries, I got no answers. Michael went around the neighborhood, trying to pull strings for me, only to be pushed off an unfinished building by Robert.
Michael was the pillar of our family.
With him gone, Sarah was taken by her family to marry a mule driver. I was deeply immersed in the sorrow of failing the college entrance exam and Michael's fall. Emily, to support the family, married Mr. Brown, who was old enough to be her grandfather, and left the dowry money for me.
Take this money. It's for you.
My family was shattered, and I was trapped in the mountains for life. Meanwhile, he went to college, got a respectable, well-paying job, married a city girl, had children, and his family was intact.
The sun hung high in the sky as I clumsily got up from the ground.
The acceptance letter should be arriving soon.
My heart pounded fiercely, and hot blood coursed through my veins. I was determined not to repeat the same mistakes. What I lost in my past life, I vowed to reclaim in this one. With determination, I started running with the largest strides I could manage. On the way, I saw Mrs. Johnson riding a bicycle.
Sorry, Mrs. Johnson, I need to borrow your bike for a bit. I'll return it to you personally.
The mountain road was rough, and I fell several times. Enduring the pain, I finally reached my family's mud house.
Robert.
A middle-aged man in his 40s, Robert, was squatting by the water tank at my house's entrance. Hearing my voice, he jolted, quickly stood up, and put his hands behind his back.
Robert, what are you doing at our doorstep?
I sneered inwardly. Robert's family was the wealthiest in our village, running a pig farm. They had always dreamed of producing a scholar and pinned all their hopes on his son, Tom. But Tom was hopeless, only knowing how to play in the mud and frequently skipping classes.
It's Leo, I'm here to see your father. Since he's not here, I'll be on my way,
he said, hurriedly covering his pocket and preparing to leave. I reached out and held Robert's hand, chuckling softly.
Robert, your memory is getting worse. How could you forget to leave something behind?
I used 2 fingers to pull out a crumpled envelope from his left pocket. Robert tried to stop me, but I opened it first. An acceptance letter addressed to Leo.
Look at Robert's eyes, I thought it was for Tom.
After sending Robert off with a forced smile, I returned to my room to admire my acceptance letter. I specially prepared a meal at home, cooked a few dishes, and waited for my father to return from the construction site. My mother, Sarah, and sister, Emily, had gone to gather pigweed.
Father, mother, sister, I miss you all so much.
The sun set, and stars dotted the sky. Mother and Emily returned home after gathering pigweed. Only father was left. The dishes on the table were reheated several times. I poked my head out the window repeatedly, but apart from a few stray dogs, there was no movement. I had a bad feeling. After calming them down, I ran to the construction site where father worked. It was already getting dark. The site was deserted.
Father, Father, Leo is here to find you.
Only echoes remained in the empty space. I wandered aimlessly around the construction site, flashlight in hand. Suddenly, I noticed a shadow at my 2 o'clock. As I approached, I heard a familiar voice.
Don't even think about it.
It was Michael's voice. I saw someone teetering on the edge, about to fall any second. Memories of my father's tragic accident from a previous life flooded back, filling me with boundless fear. Without hesitation, I quietly ascended the stairs from behind. As I got closer, their conversation became clearer.
You won't even get 10,000. Your son going to school is a waste. Let my son Tom go instead.
Dream on. Your son's lack of success is your problem. Don't think you can steal my son's opportunity.
We're brothers, after all. I don't want to make this too ugly.
Robert's voice grew colder as he pushed Michael closer to the edge. Just as he reached out, I swiftly moved behind him and threw him onto the concrete with an over-the-shoulder throw. Finally, I no longer had to suppress my hatred. My fists rained down on his corpulent body like a storm. He writhed on the ground like a pig, his screams piercing the night. I remained silent, having already turned off and discarded my flashlight in a corner. I grabbed a handful of cement and stuffed it into his mouth.
If you dare lay a hand on my father, neither you nor your son will get away with it.
I hoisted Michael onto my back. A weak voice came from the ground.
Mad dog.
I chuckled and spat in his face. How did you know I was a mad dog? Be careful, or I might take a bite out of you. Michael's chest pressed against my back, our heartbeats gradually sinking. When I was a child, he carried me, now it was my turn to protect him. He said nothing, just patted my shoulder. Back home, the aroma of hot food filled the air. Sarah and Emily hummed cheerful tunes while Michael and I sipped on some wine, chatting away.
You should take this money. We need to host a grand and beautiful graduation banquet.
I declined Michael's money. I intended to fund it myself. In the back hills of Chien King Village, there was an abandoned pond. I used my government scholarship to lease it. I planned to raise mussels and harvest pearls. In the future, more and more people would focus on beauty. One leading company started by making pearl powder from mussels. Coincidentally, the founder was from my village. I found him and proposed a business partnership. Little did anyone know, he was also a prospective college student who had received a scholarship. We learned mussel farming together and sought investors. My persuasive skills helped us secure significant funding, and our business gradually took off. However, some people couldn't stand to see others succeed. Robert somehow obtained a college diploma for Tom, which was quite impressive for that era. He seemed to have completely forgotten about that night. Every day, he came to Michael with a smile. Michael, being honest and kind-hearted, had forgiven his brother and shared all our plans about the pearl powder business.
Farming isn't that easy. I lost tens of thousands raising pigs. You think you can start a business before you're even ready? It's a guaranteed loss.
Peter would scurry away whenever he saw me, leaving Michael to parrot his words back to me. Dad, don't get too close to him. Don't listen to anything he says. I assured Michael that morning, but that very night, disaster struck our farm. A heavy rainstorm hit, and the wire fence around the farm broke, leaving a gaping hole. Most of the mussels and fish inside were dead, their bellies upturned. My partner and I carefully inspected the area and finally discovered something unusual. The cut in the wire fence was clean, clearly made by someone with scissors. The clams inside had been maliciously poisoned. This incident set us back significantly, but we weren't afraid of starting over.
The beginning is always the hardest. This is just one failure.
After repairing the fence around the farm, we waited for a month. I deliberately told Robert that the investment had already paid off. Then, for several days, I had people lying in wait by the pond, ready to catch the culprit. One stormy night, in the early hours, we finally succeeded. We caught the perpetrator and took him to the police station. Robert spent a lot of money to get himself out of trouble, but this time, my father, Michael, didn't give him a warm reception. Our lives improved steadily. Before the new school term started, my partner and I organized a grand celebration for my academic success, overshadowing Robert's family. Seeing the sparse attendance at his event, Robert's face was almost touching the ground.
All you do is eat. Look at others.
Tom snapped, throwing down his chopsticks in anger.
Why didn't you get me into a good university? I'll always be overshadowed by Leo.
He stormed off with a few friends. I walked in and placed a gift on the table covered with red silk. Robert sat in a chair, head down, saying nothing. Our clam farm was back on track, and we hired a few people to keep an eye on things. Then, I went off to school. Before the term started, I took my family to town to buy clothes. I picked out a few white dresses with floral patterns for my sister, Emily, to try on.
Why would I wear this? It's not practical for work, and showing my legs is embarrassing.
She said, blushing, though her eyes were glued to the dress. I pushed my mother, Sarah, and Emily into the fitting room and had the tailor make a few suits for my father, Michael.
Sharp. Handsome.
I exclaimed as his short but upright figure was reflected in the mirror. My father blushed.
This isn't right. The construction site is full of mud. You should save the money for your studies.
I earn money to give you a good life. I have enough for my studies.
As I spoke, the two ladies finally emerged. On the left, Emily wore a white floral dress with white sneakers, her braids hanging on either side, her big, bright eyes sparkling. On the right, Sarah wore a dark green cheongsam that accentuated her figure. Despite being nearly 40, she still had her charm. My father was stunned. A man earns money for his family. Seeing my mother and sister dressed beautifully made me happy. After a week-long train journey, I finally arrived in Huang County. Looking at the prestigious academy before me, my eyes welled up. After so many years, I was finally walking in with my head held high instead of passing by with my head down. Lying on my dorm bed, I closed my eyes, my mind filled with memories of my humble past. No education, endless bricklaying, blisters on my hands that would burst and heal repeatedly, leaving my hands calloused. I never imagined these hands would one day hold a scalpel, saving lives. At school, I met many like-minded people, broadening my horizons and expanding my network. I even started dating a lovely girl from the teacher's college across the street. Oh, and Tom's school was right across from mine. One day, while eating noodles outside, I ran into him.
Enjoying your school?
He asked, arm around a girl, looking at me provocatively.
Have you lost your mind coming out here to bark? I got into university on my own merit. What right do you have to say I'm taking your place?
I didn't want to waste my precious time. With me here, no one can decide my sister's marriage without my consent.
Your grandparents are back from the old home and they're planning to marry off your sister.
I held my breath, feeling a tightness in my chest. Soon, I arrived home. In front of the house made of yellow earth, there were several more chickens and ducks. I pushed the door open and was greeted by the sight of dozens of pounds of pork, various silks, fruits.
Oh, our college student is back.
Sitting cross-legged on the Kong was my grandmother. That biased grandmother who favored boys over girls. In her eyes, her eldest son was everything. Robert's family was her real family. Michael sat silently with his head down, and Sarah was secretly wiping her tears. The room was small, and you could see everything at a glance. I didn't see Emily. With cold eyes, I threw my bag on the table. I questioned coldly.
Did you sell my sister?
In the past life, after my father passed away, my sister married out of necessity. In this life, my father is still alive, and my pearl factory is doing well. There's no need for my sister to marry that man. Isn't this a slap in my face?
What nonsense are you talking about? Your sister is getting married properly. 2,000 as a dowry, plus pork, chickens, ducks, silk. Your sister is lucky.
The old woman was eating pork from a bowl, her eyes flashing with calculation and greed. Humph. I gathered up the chickens, ducks, red silk, pork, and rice, and packed them into a sack.
And the $2,000. Hand it over, and I'll return it to Mr. Brown.
The old woman and old man were so angry they got off the Kong and started hitting me with their shoes. Robert was fanning the flames on the side.
You're being disrespectful to your elders, bringing shame to the family. Just because you're a college student, you think you can disrespect your elders?
All that education, wasted.
High education? Bah! Useless.
The old woman not only belittled me but also insulted my father.
Emily dresses inappropriately, showing her legs, doing nothing proper, always running to that broken factory of yours. No decency at all. She's lucky someone wants her.
Anger surged from the bottom of my heart, and I grabbed the teacup on the table and smashed it on the ground.
That's right. I'm being disrespectful, so what? As long as I'm here, no one can touch my sister. I bought her those dresses. I wouldn't let any man in the village marry my sister.
They seemed to be cut off from power, and the air suddenly froze. I shouldered the sack and walked out. Robert gave the old woman a look, and she immediately understood.
Go get your son back. Such a good marriage can't be ruined by your son.
The old woman ordered my father.
That's your sister's lifelong happiness.
I looked at my father, and Sarah, with swollen eyes, suddenly broke down.
I want to bring Emily back. I've compromised once, and I don't want to compromise again. Emily, oh my poor Emily, why is her life so hard?
Sarah held my hand, standing united with me. My father feared the old woman the most. If she said 2, he wouldn't dare say 1. Because of the old woman, he respected and flattered his elder brother, who was deeply loved by their parents. Facing the old woman's threats and the old man's pressure, my father, in a moment of weakness, married off my sister. I looked at my father with disappointment, his lips moving as if he wanted to say something. Time was running out, and I pulled my mother by the hand and walked out. We arrived at the man's house. He blocked me from seeing my sister. I knocked him to the ground and pushed the door open. My sister was lying on the cement floor, her exposed skin covered in bruises and marks. My eyes filled with blood, and I immediately took off my coat to cover her. I went out and grabbed Mr. Brown by the neck.
I don't care what the reason is. You have to pay.
My wife, even if I beat her to death, it's my business.
Fine. I tightened my grip. Robert's eyes flashed with malice, and he rushed over, pretending to stop me. But he had a hammer hidden in his sleeve, swinging it to hit my head. One blow, and I'd be either gone or severely hurt. Because I often carried bricks and was wary of them, I dodged, and the hammer hit Mr. Brown's head instead.
Why did you dodge? I didn't mean to. It's all your fault.
The hammer fell to the ground with a clang. Mr. Brown, holding the bump on the back of his head, pointed at us with his bloody hand and said,
I'll send you to jail.
Facing his accusation, I was confident. At the police station, I presented photos of my sister's injuries and a medical report, turning the tables.
As far as I know, you and my sister haven't registered your marriage.
In the end, Mr. Brown and Robert were both sent to prison for intentional harm. I was educated and then released. I had already thrown that pile of junk at Mr. Brown's house, and the missing $2,000 had been eaten by the 2 old people. The old woman and old man were making a scene in my house.
Oh, what a misfortune! What did I do to deserve a cowardly son and a thankless grandson?
Seeing me, the old woman pushed and cursed, telling me to get out.
This house was built by my father. It's my home. Why should I leave? And give me back the $2,000.
The old woman snorted coldly, crossing her arms and raising her eyebrows.
No money, just my life.
I looked down and saw a gold bracelet peeking out from her long sleeve, understanding where the money went. I smiled, took a bar of soap, and wet it. I rolled up her sleeve, and with the soap's lubrication, the bracelet came off easily. The old woman was furious. She charged at me like a mad bull, tearing at my clothes. I weighed the bracelet. The old woman was quite wealthy. This bracelet was worth more than $2,000. I'm not one to bully others, so I only took $2,000. I went to the gold shop, melted down $2,000 worth, and threw a lump of gold back to the crazy old woman. Ridiculously, she had the gold made into gold teeth. A few days later, she was walking at night and someone pulled out all her gold teeth with pliers. Now, she speaks with a lisp. The scale of the pearl factory kept expanding, and my account balance was growing rapidly. I purchased several properties in the city. After Emily returned, she was always in low spirits, and Michael felt deeply guilty, constantly repenting for his weakness. To lift the gloom at home, I decided to move the whole family to the city. As for this old house, we would leave it to Mrs. White and the others. They seemed happy living there. We didn't inform Mrs. White about the move. When we left, she chased us for a kilometer.
Wait, where are you going? You can't just leave like that.
After settling my parents and Emily, I went to report to school. Life gradually returned to normal. Our pearls caught the eye of a cosmetics manufacturing company, which planned to launch a skincare product in collaboration with us.
If it works well, let's do it.
Looking at Sarah and Emily's fair and smooth skin, I already had a plan in mind. The efficiency was high, and the partner readily offered a price that satisfied me. The product hit the market and was well received. As a student entrepreneur, I was invited to an interview, appeared in the newspaper, and quickly became popular.
There he is, the young entrepreneur.
Schoolgirls would come to my classroom every day to see me. I took the opportunity to advertise, applying the pearl cream on my girlfriend's face, and then leveraged the hype to promote it further. One day, I was invited to give a lecture at a university. A masked girl suddenly rushed to the stage, grabbed the microphone from my hand.
Please, everyone, give me justice. I used his pearl cream, and my face is ruined.
The audience erupted in an uproar. Reporters, like hounds smelling blood, surrounded the girl. She removed her mask, revealing a face covered in pockmarks oozing yellow pus, emitting a foul odor.
Classmate, you need to provide evidence for your claims, or I can sue you for defamation.
Her eyes suddenly turned fierce. She threw a hospital report at my face, which fell to the ground and was picked up by a reporter.
The report claims the product contained harmful substances, leading to infection. She has united several other girls with similar symptoms.
I fell from grace instantly. Investors withdrew, public opinion turned against me, and the police launched an investigation.
I had overseen the production process, ensuring sterilization and disinfection were up to standard. Someone must be sabotaging me.
My factory was forcibly shut down, and the school suspended me. On my way home, I saw Robert and his son John, who were supposed to be in prison.
Well, isn't this the young entrepreneur? Sent back home?
Dad, what kind of representative? It's all a scam.
Leo, we must never do such deceitful things.
I coldly watched the two pests in front of me and raised my fist to hit them. They jumped like paper tigers into a nearby villa. Watching their retreating figures, a doubt surfaced in my mind.
The villa was in an expensive area, and it was a 5-story building. With the money Robert made from pig farming, he could only afford a bathroom.
When I got home, I told Michael about encountering Robert on the street. His response surprised me.
Robert got someone to support him?
To put it bluntly, it was a form of patronage.
That woman's first love was Robert.
Her brother was the prison warden, and upon seeing his former love, he felt a rekindling of old emotions.
Not only did he bring them to the city, but he also wrote his name on the mansion.
The woman treated Tom as her own son, using her financial power to make him a student representative.
Her niece was also dating Tom. With this, he had the woman, the money, and the reputation. Turning the tables was impossible.
I disguised myself and went to Tom's school, discovering his vibrant lifestyle.
He changed girlfriends 3 times a day, engaging in intimate acts in public without anyone daring to question him.
Of course, his official girlfriend never heard about his multiple relationships. However, I could lend a small hand.
During my surveillance, I found something even better.
The girls who reported me were part of Tom's harem. It's no wonder they contracted that illness.
Naturally, I documented these delightful scenes.
Setting me up required financial backing.
I found 2 women from the red light district. I transformed them into wealthy, powerful women. I gave them money to attend high-end events.
The Wong father and son, addicted to living off others, fell right into the trap.
I took a few satisfying photos, developed them, and sent them with addresses to their financial backers.
Once there was a first time, a second time followed, and the consequences of being caught were inevitable. Without their financial backers, they had no one to work hard for them.
Those girls losing their financial support and contracting gynecological issues were thrown out when they sought responsibility from Tom. It was truly divine intervention.
I found them, paid them double, and introduced them to a gynecological expert.
The only condition was to reveal the truth.
During the interview, the girls tearfully repented. They also reported Tom and his father for malicious competition and slander.
Tom and his father were kicked out of the mansion. Debt collectors soon followed.
The pigs in the pig farm died of swine fever. They lost nearly 100,000. Their family fortune was wiped out overnight.
Robert's hair turned white in a single night, and Tom was stripped of his student representative title.
My pearl
On New Year's Day, we returned to our hometown. Mrs. White's teeth were still in poor condition, so she could only drink thin rice porridge and couldn't chew the pork. She kept scolding me.
My precious son's future was ruined by you.
She poked my mom's forehead with chopsticks. She didn't dare to scold me or my dad. My mom was her target for bullying. I snapped the chopsticks she was using to poke my mom and threw them into the corner.
Hey, we're all family. Let's keep the peace.
Robert immediately tried to appease us, handing my mom an egg and offering me a cigarette. Hearing this, I couldn't help but sneer. Mrs. White pursed her lips and threw her bowl of porridge at me. I flipped the table over. Nobody eats. Mom, Dad, let's go home. Robert dropped to his knees in front of me, tears streaming down his face.
Please, I beg you for one thing. You've made some money with your factory.
I bent down, gently patted his cheek, and whispered in his ear. Do you still not understand why everything is out of control? His eyes gradually turned bloodshot, his face contorted. I smirked. Instead of getting angry, maybe you should think about how to deal with the tax evasion at your pig farm tomorrow. On graduation day, I wore my cap and gown, holding a bouquet of flowers. We took family photos. Emily would be taking her college entrance exams next year as an independent candidate.
Emily, enjoy life and pursue your dreams.
My girlfriend also accepted my proposal. After graduating from university, I didn't take over the pearl factory. Instead, I kept my shares, and my partner managed it well. I continued my studies and joined a residency program at a hospital. You might ask why I chose to study hard and work at a hospital when I could have taken over the pearl factory and made easy money. Because there's a scene I particularly wanted to see. A year later, during my night shift, an emergency patient arrived. It was Tom. He had been caught stealing a battery and was beaten up. He lay on the ground, ignored by everyone, until a sanitation worker called an ambulance.
Where are your family members? I have no family.
A few months ago, Robert had been chased by debt collectors and had taken a drastic step. I stitched up Tom's wounds and noticed his rough, cracked hands. The next day, after my shift, I changed into a sharp suit and, with my fiancée on my arm, went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our marriage certificate.